Some of you might remember a very brief shot of me putting liners in a set of aluminum barrels. This is that top end. Friend bought a bike from an older gentleman who had pretty much assembled this engine with a bunch of used parts. He wanted to actually ride this thing, so he started putting some miles on and quickly realized it needed some love. He pulled the top in, brought it to me. They were 60 over with knurling on the pistons. It was a really bad deal. So we put new liners in, back to standard, fully rebuilt the head. Super great, turned out good. Puts it back together, puts a few more miles on it. And his plunger quit coming out, which was telling him he had no oil pressure. So he decided it would probably be best to just tear it down. If this bottom end is anything like the top end was, it desperately needs help. So I'm going to get it ripped apart and we'll see what's going on the inside. I really enjoy doing pre-unit engines. One, just because they're faster, but obviously when you're doing stuff like this, the older the better, just because it's, I don't know, there's something about it that's like a little bit more enjoyable. I've done 2 pre-war engines, and I have 2 more to do. Well, 2 more for one guy, and then another one for another guy, and that I think is probably the most fun. Obviously there's like a lot of nerves that go along with it, because I can't afford to replace those things. Technically I can't afford to replace a lot of things. Shouldn't be making mistakes and damage and stuff anyway, but there's a definite higher risk when you're talking about pre-war builds, and so it makes it kind of fun in a way, I guess. Higher stakes, but yeah. So I think I'm gonna do, hopefully, when the time comes to do those engines, I'm gonna do some videos. I am a little bit nervous because I think people might get the misunderstanding that I'm like trying to do the history or something on it, or like tell this is how you do it. The one's definitely not going to be restoration level. It is actually pretty cool. He has a bronze head, high compression pistons, some lumpy cams, what else? Oh, and then a thin timing cover we're going to put on it. So that one's going to be a lot of fun because I don't have to be period correct with it. It is literally a pre-war hot rod, so that is going to be very fun. So I'm excited to do that. But the other ones I've done, and the other one I have to do, it is actually like a proper bike. So that is where the high stakes come in. But the guy's really cool, so I'm not like worried about him. It's just, you want to do it right the first time. You want to take care of things. You want it to be, as good as possible, especially, with something of value like that. I'm going to kind of take the opportunity to talk about a couple different things here, but one of the other parts of this that I wanted to bring up was I get kind of frustrated because sometimes I get questions that are, year related, when was this, when was that, and I try and explain to people as nicely and as, you know, straightforward as I can, that I'm not a historian, you know, like, I know what I need to know, but I'm definitely not in a position to, like, tell you what's right and what's wrong from year to year. I don't memorize that stuff because that's what parts books are for. You know, that's what having friends is for. You know, if I have a question, I'll either ask somebody or I'll look it up and I'll get the proper answer, you know, every time, instead of just trying to memorize this stuff and then misremembering or, you know, just being wrong for, you know, whatever reason. So it's more important to me to know how to use my machines and do a good job with that stuff than it is to be, you know, the number one guy on what happened, what year, and so on. So if you ever hear me say something that's incorrect as far as your make or model, I'm gonna do that. I make mistakes like that all the time. It's just, you know, part of the deal. I'm working on Nortons, BSAs, Triumphs, Matchless, Ariel sometimes. So if I guess I'm coming up with excuses for stuff, that's it. I've got way too many different things to try and memorize. So forgive me if I say something that's incorrect. Based on what he was telling me and what the oil looked like in the engine, my guess is the crankshaft was worn and it just got ran anyway, and the big ends got beat up pretty good. That's just a guess. It'll be kind of interesting to see. He also said, I believe this should be a Babbitt crank year, but he did say that it got switched over to a later style shell bearing assembly. So we'll see, because that was my first guess, was, oh, I bet it was just reassembled with some worn out Babbitt rods, and you know, obviously the clearances were no good, but he did say that as far as he knew, there was shell bearings in the bottom of this thing. So be fun little exercise to see what's so. Oh, now I'm gonna pull those drain pipes off of it. I love external drain pipes. Those are so cool. Cool. Alright, I'm going to pull these base nuts off. This is going to take me a second, so I'm going to edit. Always hog tie your cam followers. Zip ties or O-rings or whatever, but it's very annoying when you pull your cylinders off and then the tappets fall down in the bottom end. The other thing, we're going to get to catch our pistons. It makes me cringe when I see people just wing their jugs off and then the rods and the pistons just go ba-bow. Very sad. They're not egg yolks or anything like that, but you still, respect them. We're definitely going to be reusing these pistons, so we don't want any nicks or anything from these base studs. I will be putting new rings on, so don't comment about that. I separated the pistons from the bore, so they get new rings. I am going to pull the pistons and get rubber hoses around the rods. They appear to be shell rods. They definitely don't feel the way I expected. Huh. I mean, they're loose, but they're not. I thought they'd be like noisy loose. Stay. Alright. I'm going to get some pliers. Be very careful. Now, I call these G clips because, I mean, they're kind of shaped like a G, but I don't know if you can see those, but I really like those. Never had one like spit or anything like that, so as far as I know, they're reliable, but they're so much easier to service. They're easier to get in, they're easier to service. A standard clip, just the bare ones that just have the razor sharp edges are so hard to get out, which is a good thing, because then you know that they're not going to just fall out on their own, but they're so hard to deal with when you're just trying to do like a service or something, or even putting them in. I shoot them across the shop all the time. Those are the type that have the wear safety glasses note with them. Alright, let's see if these. Oh yeah, beautiful. Put that back where it came from. Okay. So now that we're not so top heavy, I'm going to get this timing chest pulled open, and that way we can get the bottom end split. Man, I was really hoping that was just going to... Let me see if I can... You might be too far away, but... So a rod can go back and forth from radius to radius, and that's fine. Like, you'll feel that in a lot of rods. But what you don't want is the rod to actually tilt, because if it's tilting, you've got this pin, let's call the journal a pin, and then you've got this inner diameter of the big end, and if it can go this way on it, then essentially you've got too much clearance, because it's allowing it to not, stay true. I don't know if I'm explaining that right. You get the point. So I always everybody wants to do an up and down test. But if it's up and down, you're so far gone. I mean, that is super damaged. But if you can just rock it back and forth, that kind of tells you you've got a fair amount. And the drive side is usually the most worn because it's the furthest from the pressure. Usually your timing sides aren't so bad, and the drive side really tells you everything you need to know. So there's a fair amount, but I've seen way worse than this. And I was kind of expecting. But this is a fresh rebuild, so this on a fresh rebuild, not so good. Alright, I'm going to get this timing cover off. Cut to. A couple things I didn't add. We put a new feed-in bushing also to try and, after he was experiencing those low oil pressure situations. Real quick, he's like, well, let's try that. So we did that, which, I mean, too little too late. And then Morgo oil pump too. The one that was in it had been like sandblasted. You could tell it was old and used, so it was sandblasted body and very, very, very weak, like rattling plungers in the body. So not a good pump either. So who really knows what caused what, but one of those deals where you have a problem, so let's just throw a bunch of shit at it and hope for the best when it's kind of too late. You see that a lot, but it's got aluminum cam gears, so I'm going to, got my handy dandy tool we've talked about. I'm going to get all these loose, and then it uses like a later style puller with the just a 2-bolt. So we'll get all this loosened up and pulled off. Both cams are left-hand thread, so make sure you remember that. And crank is standard right-hand thread. And then on the crank, you can do the extension trick if you don't want to use the cam gears. As much as it sucks for him, I am kind of glad we're pulling this bottom end apart because I want to vapor blast these cases to match the top end work I did. So it'll look so much better. In dull light, you couldn't really tell, but once you got it in the sun, it was kind of obvious how different, you know, that cylinder looked really, really good, and then it'd come down into this dull, hazy, you know, case, and everywhere that's had, you know, a steel wrench or, you know, chrome rub on it, it's got those like kind of shiny spots. It just sticks out. I don't know. I'm not a fan of just plain sand blasted or soda blasted aluminum. I'm noticing his keyways do not match up with the factory marks. So I'm definitely going to mark what he's got. Yeah, I'm going to mark what he's got going on here so that way I time it back to where it was before. Cam and crank gears are out, so I also pulled the case half bolts, and which just was the 3 left. Let's tap this apart, and then I gotta go home and mount. So we'll just have the satisfaction of having it split apart, and then we'll start again tomorrow. So it's being held together with, I think, Yama Bond, so it should come apart with a little bit of effort. I like to just tap all over, not focusing anywhere specifically all that hard. Obviously you don't want to hit your magneto, but it is starting to separate. So sometimes the other trick is taking a razor blade and chasing, once you do have a gap, chasing it just to break any of the real sticky spots. But I think we're just about there. Now we're so close. I think our dowel pin, there's that steel dowel that goes right there. I think that's what's hanging us up. Our front's coming apart nicely, but it does not want to separate right there, so I think that's our issue. Resist the urge to stick a screwdriver in there in between the halves and pry. That's kind of a last minute, or last resort, I should say. kind of have to figure out which side the crank's wanting to stay in. It's usually the timing side. It's usually stuck onto that a little bit tighter. Lay up its face here. I can't decide if I'm going to leave this real time or if I'll edit around it. It's usually about how long it takes. Come on. Let's tap on the crank a little bit more. Since these are double ball bearing, you know, like a unit, the drive side has that roller bearing, and so it likes to separate a hell of a lot easier than this one does. But you're fighting those inner races of both of those ball bearings. So that's why it's so much fun. Come on. Normally, it's better to have the bearing stay in the case and come off the crank, but you don't always get that luxury. So it cannot always go easily, because why would it? Okay. Now we can try and get out of the timing side. First rule is never hit the feed end of your crank with anything more than dead blow, like a rubber hammer or something. Don't go beating on it with a brass hammer or a lead hammer or anything. I've had to repair so many feed ends of cranks from people just beating on it, and it's completely unnecessary. So please do not do that. But what I usually like to do is I'll either hold it and see how it feels. It's in there pretty good. So the other option is suspend it and put some heat to it, and something's going to let go, whether the bearing lets go of the crank and it drops out, or the cases let go of the bearing and it drops out. So either way, but you do want to support this properly, so that way, you know, it has somewhere to go, but it also isn't going to fall a mile. So I will rig that up. Something to show you here on my cardboard workbench. Hopefully you can see this. This is kind of what I was talking about with what he was experiencing in the oil after he was telling me about the lack of pressure showing up on that pop-off valve. This is what was in the oil, so kind of gives you an idea. I wish you could, is more light or less light, but yeah, a lot of metal. I mean, a lot of metal, way more than what you'd want. So something's not right. It'll be interesting to see what these shells look like when we get the rods off. That's probably not a good spot. Put that here. I've got my tower of aluminum. Again, just I think I talked about that last night. You suspend it so the crank is free to fall, but not too far. You don't want anything to get damaged. Get your soft hammer out. Do not hit the feed end of the crank with anything hard. I'm going to put my hand under here to kind of hope to catch it. I think based on what happened on the other side, I think the bearing is going to come with the crank. I don't know if you can hear it. When you hit something, you can tell when it's letting go. If you're hitting this and it just sounds solid, it rings almost, quit, get your heat out. I can tell this thing is just going to let go. It's got a very dull sound to it. And again, I can already tell the bearing is coming with, so you guys are gonna have to tell me. Constructive criticism on filming is always helpful. If I'm not showing well enough what I'm doing, you know, I wouldn't mind adapting. I think I've said this before. My camera is very small. The screen on it is very tiny, so it's hard for me to know how my framing is. So if you can't see what I'm doing and you want to tell me how to do it better, constructive criticism is welcome. It's kind of neat. All right, so now we can start investigating, see what's going on here. But I don't know if you can see that, but somebody decided to do some lightning holes there. That looks like shit. It literally looks like they drilled it and then broke it with a chisel. I hate that. That is gross. Let's get the rods off and see what's going on in there. I think that's going to be the most interesting. So we'll probably just do it in the vise right here. So give me 1 second. Someone has generously marked these rods in every way possible, so we don't have to worry about knowing where they go back. Normally I like to Normally I like to mark, you know, where everything came from, so that way when I put it back on, it goes right back where it came. I think those were snugged up quite a bit. Pretty sure he's gonna want this balanced once I get done with it, so we'll probably do a little bit on that too. I really hope this isn't a disappointing reveal. That's pretty good. Let's see if I can get this to tilt the light. I'll try to hold still so it focuses on it, but I don't know how visible it is for you, but you're not gonna be able to hear it. Very, pretty crunchy. All the material that we were seeing in the oil is definitely from these shells. So this is the timing side, which is usually not as bad off. The drive side's much noisier, so let's get that one. I do enjoy these 3-piece cranks. The only downside is how much these bolts cost, and sadly it looks like these have been replaced recently. But in order for me to grind this thing, I have to take it back apart, which means I am going to be disassembling torque to yield bolts, which means he's going to have to buy new ones. Wow. This side's not as bad as the other side. I mean, it doesn't look good, but I hope this shows up. I don't know if it's going to or not. I'm either overexposing it with light or I don't know. But yeah. I'm just trying to figure out any way I can to explain or portray how grimy these are. So journals look exactly how you'd expect. I'll get you in close so you can see them. I don't know if you're going to be able to see the texture. What if I take the light away? I don't know. Definitely do not look good. I'm going to go grab the micrometer so we can see what they measure. I'm going to try not to speculate what came first. You know, it's hard to say. Maybe our measurement will tell us, but definitely not good. It's usually like if somebody calls and they're talking about their journal and oh, it looks okay or whatever, it's like I always just quick and easy, can you hear it? You know, if you can hear it, those are deep. If you can feel it, catch your fingernail on it, it's deep. But these do not look good. Let me go grab the mic. 1.624 is standard to 1.6235. That's kind of your range. I'm going to try and find the... Also, this one's been stamped on the flywheel multiple times that it's been ground, so it's probably at like 20 already. I think that's about where I like it. Yeah, that's only... I mean, that's just under spec on that side. It is ground to 20, by the way. Damn. That's, I mean, technically this is in spec, so it's, I think it's just purely lack of oil pressure is what did it in. I thought it was going to measure. Yeah, that's really close. Wow, that's sad. I'm going to venture to say it was the oil pump's fault. Just based on the way it looked and felt. Yeah, damn. That sucks. I don't know if you can read this. How do I... Anyway, I'm going to blame it on oil pump. The oil pump was not sufficient, not getting a good amount of pressure, and the big end suffered for it. Just based on the evidence, what the journals measure, and the way the pump looked and felt, I think I'm going to blame it on that. There's nothing wrong with original oil pumps. You know, you don't need to go spend Morgo money no matter what. I don't necessarily think that everybody needs to just go out and buy a Morgo. They're pricey. It's kind of nice to guarantee that you've got, you know, a brand new pump that's going to work the way you want it to, but there's nothing wrong with an original pump if it's in good shape, but you need to inspect it. Everybody always talks about, like, that noise. And then same with this. That kind of pulling vacuum. That's a good indicator right there. But you can clean these up. Check, make sure the balls are seating properly. Make sure the spring, you can get new springs. So, I mean, there are ways to freshen up an old pump, but you need to also check, and I think this was the big thing for his original pump. I'll try and get a hold of it so I can show you, but put just a single plunger in and then feel if there's any play. If it walks back and forth, all of your pressure is going to escape around that piston, so, or plunger, whatever you want to call it. So that's the most important. And when he had taken his original pump off and I got to look at it, that was the first thing I did, and I could rattle. I mean, it was noisy. Like, you could really get some play, and it's like, dude, that pump is junk. And then, like I said, it was visibly sandblasted, which I don't necessarily like that either. But same with the plungers, they were blasted and they're all chewed up, and it's just like, that pump is not usable, man. So then he put the Morgul on it. We put a new bushing in the timing cover, but it was too little too late. I mean, it was done for. So still wasn't building any pressure. It hadn't really gotten noisy yet, but you know, like that, you don't want to get to that point. If your bottom end is knocking, that's an expensive rebuild compared to a service, you know. Unfortunately, because these are both right at the bottom of his spec, I am going to have to probably grind it. There's no way I'm going to be able to polish this out. Plus, I'm not super happy with the way these radiuses look. I'm sure whoever ground this last wasn't too concerned about putting the proper British radius in. So, British, but just proper. I will be splitting this crank. I will be grinding the journals and putting it all back together. I'll vapor blast the cases too while I'm at it. But as I was taking the rest of it apart, everything else looks good. You know, the cams are good. Timing gears look great. You know, all of that stuff is just fine. But yeah, it's sad. You see this a lot. You know, some things are okay to reuse, but some things aren't. You just got to know what you're looking for. So crucial components like oil pumps, you can't play around with. You got to take them serious. So if you have any doubt in your mind, replace it. Even if you replace it with a factory pump, you know, get another used original pump that's got less miles and less abuse. That's totally cool too. It doesn't have to be a brand new Morgul. I will say, be cautious buying any repop. I'm not going to say any names, but there are certain ones out there I'm not convinced by. You know, I've disassembled them because they weren't building pressure and they're full of shavings from manufacturing. So then you try and clean them up. Well, then the balls aren't seating, so then you have a bunch of sumping happening. So not really convinced by those British-made ones. I don't think they're actually made in England. I think that they're something made in a very inexpensive place and put a made in England stamp on it, but that's just my personal experience. So that's not to say you couldn't spend the time and make one good, but just be careful of which one you get. So I'm gonna get going on this. I want to get this thing back together for him quick, so I will try and get some more footage with it. But that's the answer to that. All right, cut to a couple days later. I got these ultrasonic and then vapor blasted them. So somebody, I'm assuming they got polished at one point in their life. Obviously, if you remember, they were just dry blasted before when we took it apart. But I don't know. You don't see this smooth of a finish. So I'm assuming somebody at one point tried to polish these, and then they got dry blasted and lived their lives at some point in different ways. I don't know, but kind of leaves an interesting finish once you vapor hone the surface after that. But they'll look good. They'll at least match the cylinder and head we did. So I am currently grinding the crank for that. So I just got done with the drive side, and now I'm going to jump over. I got a setup for the timing side, but I wanted to show you. Ignore my little steady rest mark. I'm kind of mad about that. A couple things I want to show you. One, you may not be able to see it, but the radiuses on these were not very good before we started. You can even kind of see it on this other journal over here. It's not proper. I could get a gauge on it and see, but you can just tell it's a lazy radius. The other thing was, these earlier style have like more of a cut, I guess, and less of a ground out hole for the oil relief. And then I obviously have made it worse, but whoever had ground it to the 20 didn't go back and clean those up. So there was non-existent on that side, I think. Or maybe, I don't remember. One of the sides it was already gone, and the other side it looked like it was about to go. And then I obviously just took the rest of it off. And then this side, there's quite a bit left. And then a little bit left on that one, but not much. I go back with a stone and put those back in every time. So I don't know. It's usually like a good indicator of somebody's lazy work, I guess. But yeah, so I don't know. It'll be fine. Not super happy with how that radius cleaned up. They left that line behind. But if the radius is smaller than the one I'm working with, there's nothing I could do about it. It is what it is. It's not 90 degrees, and that's all that really matters. So I'm going to zero in the timing side, get it ground, and then it's like 9 o'clock. So tomorrow morning I will come back in, reassemble this with new bolts, and then we will balance it. And we're gonna go with Thunder Engineering rods. So I'm excited about that. It's gonna look really bitchin', so we will get going. But I just want to give a little halfway update on this. So I just got the oilways cleaned up there, chamfered them. You can kind of still see the remnants of the square on that one, but that one was completely flush. I had showed you that before. So both of those are now cleaned up. Other side's done. I'm going to split this back apart, put the new sludge tube in. A lot of times you can save these, just depending on how well they come out. Because you are splitting the crank in half, you kind of get a lot better access to it than what you would on like a unit. But I broke his taking it out, so I think it was used, so that would have been like another reuse for me. But anyway, new hardware. I do not reuse crank, which I think I said that too. These were brand new, so it's unfortunate, but new ones to put in, shells for the balance we're about to do. So I will get this set up. I'm going to torque the 2 halves. It has not been polished yet. I think I'm still like 2/10 fat on both of these, so that'll come out when I polish it and make it look all pretty. But I'm not super happy with how the radiuses came out. They were too tight before I got to them, so there's really nothing I can do there. But anyway, I am going to do a bunch of work. I'm not going to show you, and then we'll get on to the balance. I spun this up once already. The first correction was 20 grams removed here, and so I threw some holes in, and it was 11 grams on angle 90. So I did just a little bit of that corner buffing I like to do. Just made that, just kind of cleaned it up to see if I couldn't get anything. But this is a good example of how one side does affect the other. I still don't know how to really explain exactly the direct effect, but it talks about it in the books and stuff, and other people have talked about it. But I'm like super close now. Like I can end making corrections here on this timing side, the right side, but the left side actually got worse. So I was originally supposed to remove 11 grams from this corner, and now at angle, it was 90, now angle 93, it wants me to remove 14 grams, so even more to remove. I'm gonna probably do a little bit more across here and maybe a little bit here, but the thing that you'll run into is where it just kind of moves around. I'm sure there's somebody that can probably explain it way better than I can, but as you make corrections, it transfers, the problems into other areas. And I used to actually chase it, and it would just spend so much time, and all for nothing. It's the diminishing returns situation again, where you got to kind of decide at what point is it going to just be good enough. You have to also remember how much oil is a factor in this situation too. When this thing is spinning inside the case, it's going to pick up and hold on to so much oil. So there's a lot of variables that I cannot correct, and you kind of have to pick and choose how much time you spend on chasing these small amounts. I'm very happy with this right side. It's that 3.95. The tolerance is 0.36, so we're well under what we need to be. But over here it's 1.29, so quite a bit left as far as getting closer to that under a ½ ounce. So I'll keep working on that, but I just wanted to take a moment to kind of show you how it can actually affect it. All right, look at that. Torqued up, ready to go. I'm really happy with how this thing turned out. They just look so good. I'm not gonna let go of them because I don't want them crashing into the vise. Yeah, so now that is done. New bolts, torqued up. Journals got polished, they look great. The radiuses actually looked a little better than I thought they did once I got a good polish on them. Rods are installed, new 30 shells, and these are torqued. So it's like 40 to 43, so I just go like right at like 40, 41 for those bolts. But yeah, I'm very, very happy with how these turned out. I skipped ahead quite a bit here. You can obviously tell. I wanted to double check because it's always a good idea when you start swapping stuff, changing parts out, doing any type of work like that. You always want to check fitment way before you get yourself in trouble. I had put these skirts in a while ago, or I put these sleeves in a while ago, and it's up to you to notch them out once you re-sleeve a cylinder. You got to put these notches in. Well, I did them for standard rods, and I knew, of course, once I put these on, it was no longer going to fit. And so, let's see if I can do this one-handed. All right, I needed two hands. So, as the rod comes around, it's coming in contact with the relief in the skirt, so it needs to be opened up more. Not a ton, but it definitely needs to be relieved. Oh, it's not all the way down. I was gonna say, how did it get past? But yeah, so we're touching, and that means I'm going to go ahead and chamfer and put a little bit more into that skirt. Hopefully it won't take much, but I'm gonna go ahead and clean that up and make it look good and make sure we have plenty of room for those beefy new rods. A little bit of carbide work. I'm really happy. I got plenty of room. These rods are not going to touch, so didn't take much. It was originally, when I had done this, I used the mill, and they were pretty square on the inside, and so I did obviously bring it up a little bit, but it mostly was just knife edging to kind of give that squareness of the rod some room. So I got plenty of room now, and we are good to go. Obviously, I wanted to point out, there's no rings on the pistons right now. They're just floating in there. That's why they move so freely, and I'm not doing any harm to the bore. But you always want to do this. If you're swapping parts, mismatching things, any of that kind of goofing around, double check. Don't do anything and find out the hard way. What's up, dude?
meat, it doesn't really work on the fat. You actually have to have exposed meat so the smoke can penetrate and you get the clean, clear smoke flavor. So both ways. Now there's a lot of leeway. So for instance, in the United States,
last night I finished up with double checking my cam timing. I tried to make sure I put it back where I found it. Mostly it was because I had noticed disassembling that it wasn't on the stock timing marks. These are actually alloy gears too, so they have each keyway numbered, so they're kind of set up for doing degreeing. I'm getting close. I need to get these rocker boxes checked out. I already can tell there's a few things I don't like about them, so I'm going to split them, get all this Yama bond off of them, and then I'm going to finish everything up as far as torquing the base nuts. They need to be done. I'll get the rocker boxes on. I'll torque all of that. And then a oil pump needs to go on. Push rod tubes obviously go on with the rocker boxes. But yeah, so just a few more things. Got the Franz and Grubb timing wheel on there. Works great. But I will, I'll keep going. I didn't really want this video to be all that in depth. You know, I'm not trying to do a how-to on this for sure, but just thought it'd be kind of fun to follow along with doing the service on this thing.